My name is Joseph Edward Smith. I'm 80 years old. And I need to tell you something I wish I had understood when I was 50. I thought getting older would automatically make life clearer. I thought wisdom would arrive on its own, like the mail. I thought if I worked hard, stayed decent, paid my bills, and kept my head down, then the later years of my life would naturally feel peaceful and full. But that is not what happened. I entered my 50s carrying habits that were quietly draining the joy out of me. I kept company with people who left me tired. I clung to routines that were already too small for the life I still wanted. I acted as if time would keep renewing itself. I put my own health lower on the list than work, family, duty, and other people's comfort. I replayed old mistakes. I tried to fit into roles that no longer fit me. And I nearly made the same foolish mistake I watched older people make with new technology. You see, I did not lose joy all at once. I gave it away a little at a time. Honestly, that is what shocked me most. I was not in a crisis. I was simply living wrong for the stage of life I was in. And when I finally saw that, everything started to change. I spent most of my life working in libraries. I was a careful man. I still am. I liked order. I liked predictability. I liked knowing where things belonged. That sounds harmless, and sometimes it was. But in my 50s, I started noticing that I was giving my time to people who did not leave me feeling lighter. I would sit through lunch, dinner, meetings, phone calls, and little social visits, and afterward I would feel smaller than I did before. I felt criticized in subtle ways. I felt weighed down by endless complaints. I felt my own spirit getting quieter. At first, I told myself that this was just part of adulthood. I told myself mature people tolerate difficult personalities. I told myself loyalty meant staying available no matter how bad I felt after. And here's what I didn't understand then. Being polite is not the same as being wise. I remember one man in particular. I had known him for years. Every conversation turned sour. If I shared good news, he minimized it. If I mentioned a plan, he predicted it would fail. If I spoke with hope, he answered with cynicism. I started dreading seeing him, but I kept seeing him because history can make us confuse familiarity with friendship. One afternoon, I left a coffee shop after meeting him, sat in my car, and said out loud, "Why do I keep doing this to myself?" That was a turning point. I did not become cruel. I did not make a scene. I simply began stepping back. In one case, I told the truth. I said that I cared about the person, but I could not keep having conversations that left me feeling bad about life and bad about myself. It was awkward. I was scared. I felt rude even though I was being honest. But you know what surprised me most? The world did not end. In one case, the person changed a little. In another case, the distance stayed. Either way, my peace improved. I learned that at my age, every hour matters too much to spend it being diminished. That lesson led me into the next one, and this one was even harder for me. I had to stop resisting change. Let me explain. I am the kind of man who lived in the same house for a very long time, built routines over decades, and found comfort in familiar shelves, familiar streets, and familiar habits. I liked stability because my childhood taught me what instability could do. When I was a boy, I watched my father come home with fear on his face after the mill closed. Since then, I have always tried to build a life that felt secure. So when I got older, I confused security with staying exactly the same. I thought settled meant safe. I thought fixed meant healthy. But life has a way of shaking the furniture. For me, that shaking came later than I expected. The world changed around me, and I had to make choices I never imagined making. I spent time away from home. I let go of things I had held on to for too long. I saw that some of what I called comfort was really just fear wearing house shoes. Honestly, I did not like that realization. I liked my snow globe life. I liked everything settled. But once that snow globe got shaken, I discovered something important. I was not too old for reinvention. I was not too old for adventure. I was not too old to live differently. I didn't know it at the time, but some of the change I feared most was actually opening a door. I began traveling more. Catherine and I spent time in Italy, and later I found myself looking at my life from a distance. Distance can tell the truth. I could see which habits had become chains. I could see that comfort had been deciding too much for me. You see, change is frightening when you stand outside it. Once you are inside it, it often feels like air. I started saying yes to things that would have made the younger version of me nervous. New places, new rhythms, new uses of my days. Nothing reckless. I have never been reckless. But I stopped treating change like an enemy. That made my 60s wider and more alive than my 50s had been. Then came the lesson that now sits closest to my heart. I had to stop taking time for granted. This one is not dramatic, but it is sharp. When I was 52, I still felt capable. When I was 58, I still felt strong. When I was 63, I could still move well, think clearly, and do most things I wanted to do without asking my body for permission first. That is a dangerous season because it tricks you. It whispers that you have plenty of time. It tells you there will be another year, another summer, another trip, another chance to call, another moment to begin. But time is not generous in the way we pretend it is. It is exact. One birthday, I sat with a notebook and did simple math. I asked myself how many healthy, active weeks I might reasonably have left if I was lucky. The number was not comforting. It woke me up. I did not become morbid. I became awake. Honestly, I wish more people would do that math. I wish I had done it earlier. Because once I understood that my weeks were numbered in a more real way than I had allowed myself to admit, I stopped speaking about time casually. I started protecting mornings. I started making room for visits, walks, reading, painting, dinner with Catherine, real conversations with my children, and proper attention to my grandchildren. I started asking a painful question. Did I use this week well? And here's what I didn't understand then. Wasting time does not always look lazy. Sometimes it looks responsible. Sometimes it looks respectable. Sometimes it looks like saying yes when you should say no, keeping a commitment you have outgrown, or staying busy so you do not have to think. I had done all of that. I had spent years being useful while forgetting to be alive. Once I saw that, I could not unsee it. That naturally brought me to health. I had to stop putting everything else ahead of it. For years, I acted as if my body and mind would tolerate neglect because I was disciplined in other areas. I was careful with money. I was reliable at work. I showed up for people. I kept promises. But none of that changes what happens when you ignore sleep, movement, quiet, good food, stress, grief, or mental exhaustion. Let me explain. There is a kind of self-neglect that hides under duty. It sounds noble. It says, "I'll deal with myself later." I said that more times than I can count. In my working years, it was easy to push my needs down the list. One more hour, one more task, one more errand, one more favor, one more bit of pressure. I told myself that because I was functioning, I was fine. I was wrong. I was not falling apart, but I was running a deficit. And when I got older, I realized that recovery is not as automatic as it once was. My health deserved better from me. My mind deserved better from me. So I changed. I protected sleep. I walked more. I kept doing Tai Chi. I cooked with intention. I stopped treating medical appointments as interruptions. I guarded my peace more carefully. Honestly, one of the biggest signs of maturity is learning that taking care of yourself is not selfish. It is maintenance for the life you still want to live. After that came a quieter battle. I had to stop living with regret. This one took time. Nobody reaches 50 or 60 with a clean record. I certainly did not. I had moments I handled poorly. I had words I wish I had never spoken. I had seasons when I was too rigid, too distracted, too worried, too focused on what seemed urgent instead of what was important. I made good decisions overall, but that does not erase the ones that still sting. There were years when I would replay old failures as if repetition could revise them. It cannot. You know what surprised me most? Regret can become a form of vanity. I do not say that harshly, I say it honestly. I was still centering myself in events I could no longer change. I was still trying to win arguments that were over. I was still asking the past to serve me something it does not serve anyone. The past does not return corrected. It returns remembered. That is all. Once I accepted that, I began practicing something harder than guilt. I began practicing forgiveness, not excuses, forgiveness. I told myself the truth about my mistakes, and then I stopped living inside them. I did not do that in a single afternoon, but I did it. I had to, because regret eats the present if you feed it enough. Then there was identity. I had to stop pretending to be someone I was not. This may sound simple, but it is not. By the time we reach later life, many of us have performed so many versions of ourselves that we can forget which one is real. I had professional expectations around me for decades. People had ideas about how I should dress, speak, behave, and present authority. Some of those expectations made sense, some did not. As I got older, I started asking a blunt question. If I cannot be myself now, when exactly was I planning to begin? So I loosened my grip on performance. Some days I wore what felt like me instead of what looked proper to someone else. Some days I spoke plainly when politeness would have hidden the truth. Some days I left rooms where nonsense was being celebrated because I no longer wanted to lend my silence to it. I didn't know it at the time, but every small act of honesty was giving me energy back. Pretending is expensive. It costs attention. It costs peace. It costs self-respect. Being myself did not make everyone like me. But at 80, I can tell you that being liked is a poor substitute for being real. The last lesson may sound smaller, but it matters. I had to stop dismissing new technology just because it was new. I watched older people do this with great confidence. They would wave away some new tool and say they did not need it. Sometimes they were proud of not learning it. I understood that instinct. We all get tired. We all reach an age where friction feels unnecessary. But I also watched what happened when people refused too much. They became dependent. They became isolated. They made simple things harder than they needed to be. I saw this in my own family. I watched one generation hesitate with email, then get rescued later by smartphones and texting. That worked out better than it might have. But the deeper lesson stayed with me. Refusing every new thing is not wisdom. Sometimes it is fear dressed up as principle. Let me explain. I am not saying chase every gadget. I am saying do not reject tools that help you stay connected, informed, capable, and independent. I use technology now in ways that support my life. I speak with my family more easily. I learn faster. I manage practical matters with less friction. I stay engaged with the world instead of muttering at it from a distance. That matters, especially as the years move. That matters more than pride. There was one more moment about time that I still think about. I was at Lake George one summer, standing on the porch early in the morning with a cup of coffee, watching light move across the water. I had seen that view many times, but that morning I caught myself thinking about chores, paperwork, messages, and things I might do later. I was physically present and mentally absent, and I remember saying, "Joseph, if you cannot be here now, when will you ever be here?" That question stayed with me. Since then, I have tried to notice ordinary beauty while it is still ordinary. breakfast with my wife, a call from my daughter, my grandson asking me about history, paint drying in the studio, my own legs carrying me down a familiar street. These are not dramatic things, but they are the fabric of a good life. Miss enough of them and you start wondering where your years went. The health piece also became real for me in a way numbers never could. I had a season when I felt more tired than usual and more irritable than I wanted to admit. Nothing was terribly wrong, which almost made it worse, because it let me excuse it. I told myself I was just busy. I told myself I was just getting older. But I was eating carelessly, sleeping lightly, and letting stress settle into my body. Once I started paying attention again, the fog lifted. Not overnight, but steadily. I was reminded that decline is not always destiny. Sometimes it is neglect, and regret showed up most sharply in family life. I can still think of evenings when one of my children wanted my full attention and I was distracted by work, obligations, or my own private worries. I cannot go back and fix that, but I can do something now. I can answer the phone with warmth. I can listen without rushing. I can apologize where apology is due. I can show up as the older man I wish I had been sooner. That does not erase the past, but it does redeem something in the present. So when I look back now, here is what I see. I enjoyed my 50s and 60s more when I stopped giving my energy to draining people, stopped fighting change, stopped acting as if time would wait, stopped pushing my health aside, stopped living inside regret, stopped performing a false version of myself, and stopped treating new technology like a personal insult. Honestly, none of those changes made me younger. That was never the point. They made me more alive in the years I actually had. They made me more present, more peaceful, more honest, more free. And if you are somewhere in your 50s or 60s listening to me now, I want to ask you for something simple. I want you to take one of these habits and deal with it this week. Not someday, this week. Leave one draining conversation sooner. Say yes to one change that scares you a little. Protect one day better. Schedule one thing for your health. Put down one old regret. Tell the truth once where you usually perform. Learn one piece of technology you have been avoiding. Then tell me in the comments which one it is, because I really do want to know. And if this helped you, press like and subscribe, not for vanity, but so this message reaches somebody else who needs it before more time slips by. I have lived long enough to know that good reminders can arrive late, but they are still worth hearing. And if you want to keep going with me, stay close for the next conversation, because I have more to say about making the most of retirement while you still have the health and freedom to enjoy it. That decision is hard for many people. I understand that. But it gets easier when you start seeing your remaining years clearly. That is what I hope I have helped you do today.